Hey guys, Cam here from Pocket-lint, and at the launch the iPhone XR was billed as the sort of everyman's iPhone X, being that it's cheaper than both the flagship XS and XS Max. Unlike the Max though, it's big and it features a lot of the same components and hardware. What's more, it has that big expansive screen on the front. So the question is, should you pay hundreds more to get the Max, or is the XR just fine? Let's dive in. First up, design. Now, before even going into specific specifications, the first thing I noticed when I picked up the XR, having used the XS Max for a few weeks, was how it felt chunkier. Place them side by side and you'll see why. The XR is ever so slightly thicker than the XS Max, but it's also considerably shorter and more than 2mm narrower. The other thing that makes a difference in hand is the anodized aluminium edges versus the polished steel on the XS Max. Of course, that polished appearance does make it look much more premium than its matte finished smaller cousin. But the biggest differences appear when you turn the phone around. The XR of course comes in a selection of colourful glass finishes and has a single camera, where the XS Max has the dual camera with more subdued finishes that each have this metallic sheen to them when you glance them at an angle in the right light. As for water and dust resistance, the IP68 XS Max can last up to 30 minutes in 2 meters of water, while the XR is IP67, so it's only certified for that amount of time in 1 meter of water. Now on to a slightly less prominent difference on the front. The frame around the screen. That bezel on the XR display is slightly thicker than on the XS Max, and because the display itself is roughly half an inch smaller diagonally, it's more obvious than it would be if they had the same sized screens. And that means the display itself doesn't seem quite as edge to edge as the XS Max is, but in truth there's not a lot in it. It's still more immersive than the LCD screen on the 8 Plus or previous plus-sized models. Now digging into those screens a little more, it's a 458 pixel per inch OLED on the XS Max versus a 326 pixel per inch LCD on the XR, and the differences are as you'd expect. Contrast is higher and blacks are darker on the OLED display on the XS Max, while whites and lighter skin tones are slightly warmer than on the LCD. The extra resolution and contrast does make a difference in most interfaces too. Text appears slightly sharper and the overall content is more dynamic. At arm's length and day-to-day use you might not notice it all that much, but put them side by side and it's immediately noticeable, especially when you're watching videos. Because of the higher dynamic range, movies, on Netflix for example, are more detailed and highlights are brighter, while details in shadows are better, plus colours are richer. Given that it supports both HDR10 and Dolby Vision standards, that's understandable. They both support True Tone to adapt the colour profile to match the ambient lighting in your room, but only the XS Max has 3D touch, meaning you don't get those shortcut actions on the app icons with the XR. Now on to performance and battery, and you'll experience much the same here on the two devices. Both phones use the same A12 Bionic processor. The XR does have less RAM, but in daily use you can't really tell the difference. Apps and data load just as quickly on both, and even the most intensive games work just as well on the XR as they do on the XS Max. And although the battery capacity is slightly less on the XR, it'll last just as long. We can comfortably get through an average working day on both phones with around 40% left over at night. And since they both support 7.5 watt wireless charging, they pretty much fill up at the same speed too. Looking at the cameras, you'll get virtually identical results here as well, and that's because the single 12 megapixel f-stop 1.8 camera on the back is the same as the primary wider angle lens on the XS Max. You don't get the telephoto zoom, which might be a key missing feature for some, but if you just want a camera that snaps great photos and shoots great video, you'll do no worse with the cheaper XR than on the XS Max. You might not be able to take portrait mode shots of inanimate objects with the XR, but apart from that you're not really missing anything. What's more, the front-facing camera and depth sensors on the front are exactly the same too. Now on to pricing and storage, and in the UK the XR starts at £749 with 64GB, 128GB and 256GB models available, and the middle tier only costs £50 more than the lowest. In stark contrast, the XS Max starts at £1,099, that's $350 more, and comes in 64, 256 and 512GB models, with the middle tier costing a hefty £150 more than the lowest model. So clearly overall there's some difference in design and display, but in all other aspects you'll get much the same experience on both phones. Whether or not you think the extra £350 to £450 is worth it depends on how much value you put on that classy premium design and the better screen. Personally though, I think most people will be perfectly happy with the XR and having a few more pennies in the bank. I've been Cam, I'm at Cam Bunton on all the important social media networks. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up, subscribe for more videos, and I will see you again soon.